The transport ship moved slowly through the cloudy sky of Dornos. It was large, old, and covered with dust from the outer rim worlds. Among the many passengers, one man stood quietly near the edge of the landing bay. His name was Terran. He wore a brown coat, a travel pack on his back, and simple boots. He didn't speak much, and no one paid him any attention. He looked like a common traveler. Not strong, not famous, not important. Dornos was not a planet for ordinary people. It was known across the stars as the home of the Order of the Blade, a group of ancient warriors who protected the galaxy's most powerful artifact, the Kyle Shar, also called the Living Blade. For hundreds of years, the best fighters, champions, and warlords had come here for one reason: to lift the blade. No one ever could. The blade refused them all. The transport ship touched the ground near Stonehall City, where the annual trial of steel was about to begin. Every year, warriors from different star systems came here to prove themselves. Some hoped to join the Order. Others came only for fame. But all of them, in their hearts, dreamed of holding the legendary blade. Terran stepped off the ship and looked around. The streets were filled with banners, music, and groups of alien visitors. Some were tall and thin with glowing eyes. Others were covered in armor and carried great weapons. Everyone walked with pride. Everyone looked ready for battle. Terran moved through the city quietly. He saw a group of locals talking near a food stall. "Another trial is starting," one said. "Did you see the warrior from Iron Reach? 12 victories in 1 year. The blade won't choose him either," another replied. "It never does." Terran bought a piece of bread from a vendor and sat on a stone bench. He watched the people walk by. His eyes were calm, not filled with hope or fear. He didn't look like a man here to fight. Later that day, he made his way to the Blade Hall, where the Kelshar was kept. The hall was a huge round structure made of black stone and silver pillars. Inside, the air felt cold and heavy, like time had slowed. At the center of the hall stood a platform of glass and metal, and on it rested the blade. It was beautiful, long and curved, with lines of blue light running through it like rivers. It had no wires, no batteries, no control system. It simply lived. The blade was surrounded by guards in silver armor. No one was allowed to get too close without permission. Terran stood behind the crowd. People whispered about the blade. Some bowed, some laughed, some looked nervous. Terran simply looked at it and said nothing. The trials began the next day. A voice echoed across the city through speakers. "Let the trial of steel begin. Warriors of all worlds, step forward. In the great arena near the Blade Hall, thousands gathered." The Order's high judges sat on high thrones. Names were called and warriors entered one by one. The first challenger was from the moons of Torak. He wore red armor and had sharp arms like blades. He approached the platform, raised his hand, and tried to take the sword. It didn't move. The crowd was silent. The warrior stepped back with anger. Next came a giant from the planet of Ice Hollow. She was strong and calm. She walked with pride and reached for the blade. It didn't glow. It didn't rise. She stepped back slowly, one after another. Champions from many worlds came forward. Each one failed. The blade remained silent. Terran sat far from the front row. He didn't try to join the challengers. He didn't even speak to anyone. But something strange happened while he watched. His heart felt light. Not excited, not afraid. Just light. It was like the blade was not pushing him away. It wasn't calling him, but it also wasn't distant. It felt near. By the third day, people were getting restless. The Order of the Blade announced that only 2 more days of trials remained. Then the blade would return to rest for another year. Terran walked through the quiet garden near the Blade Hall. He saw a woman sitting under a tree, writing in a small book. She looked up and smiled. Her name was Nara. "You're not from here," she said. "No, I'm just passing through," Taryn replied. "You watch the trials?" "Yes." "They never succeed. The blade waits for someone else, someone different." Taryn sat near her. "You seem calm," Nara said. "Not like most who come here." "I'm not a warrior," Taryn said. "I used to work on rescue ships, helped repair stations, delivered food. Nothing special." Nara looked at him for a moment. "Sometimes the blade doesn't look for strength. Maybe it looks for something else." Taryn said nothing. He looked toward the blade hall in the distance. The sun was setting behind it, and the sky turned soft orange. That night, in a small room he rented, Taryn dreamed of the blade. In the dream, he stood alone in the hall. No crowd, no guards. The blade floated in front of him, glowing softly. He didn't reach for it. He only looked at it, and it looked back. The next morning, he woke early and walked toward the hall again. The last challengers were getting ready. The strongest warrior of this year, Corv of the Void March, was set to try later that day. Everyone believed he had the best chance. Taryn stood at the back of the hall, watching silently. No one noticed him. He was just a human stranger, quiet and still, but something was about to change. The sun rose over the grand arena of Durnos. Long shadows stretched across the stone floor as the crowd gathered once more. It was the final day of the trial of steel, and excitement filled the air. Drums echoed from towers, flags of different planets waved above. The people were waiting for something big to happen. Taryn stood at the edge of the crowd. He wore the same brown coat, his travel bag still on his back. He had not signed his name in the list of challengers. No one expected him to do anything. He was just another visitor in the background. The first challenger of the day stepped forward. She was from Moran, a planet known for its fierce wind warriors. Her body moved like a storm, light and fast. The crowd cheered as she walked up the steps to the Blade Hall platform. She stood in front of the sword, bowed, and placed both hands on the hilt. The blade gave off a cold shimmer but did not move. She pushed harder, her hands glowing with energy. But the sword remained still. After a few moments, she stepped back. Her face showed no anger, only confusion. A voice echoed through the hall. "Challenger has failed." Next, the second warrior came from a world made of floating islands. His armor was shaped like a bird's wings. He circled the blade, trying to find a new way to touch it. He spoke ancient words of power. Still, nothing happened. More warriors followed, some strong, some clever, some peaceful. All came with hope in their hearts, all left with quiet disappointment. The blade refused them all. Nara, the historian Taryn, had met in the garden, stood near the judges. She watched the trials and took notes. Her eyes kept drifting toward the back of the hall where Taryn stood. He had not moved all morning. He simply watched with calm eyes. She whispered to herself, "Why is he still here?" Hours passed. The crowd grew quiet. They waited for the final challenger, the one most believed had a chance. His name was Corv of the Void March, a war hero, with skin like steel and eyes like burning coal. He had led battles across 10 systems and defeated creatures that lived in the deep dark of space. Corv stepped into the arena, and the crowd cheered loudly. He raised his fist and walked with slow, heavy steps toward the platform. His armor was black with red edges. Every part of him looked built for war. As he stood before the blade, he removed his gloves and placed both hands on the hilt. The hall went silent. Even the wind outside seemed to stop. The blade glowed softly just for a moment. Some in the crowd gasped. But then, the light faded. Corv pushed harder. Sparks flew from his arms. The stone beneath his feet cracked. Still, the blade did not rise. Corv shouted in anger and struck the platform with his fist. He turned to the judges. "This is a trick," he said. "I am the strongest. Why does it not move?" One of the judges stood. "Strength alone is not what the blade seeks." Corv stepped down, his face hard. The crowd watched him in silence. Taran watched too, but not with judgment. He understood that feeling. Trying your best, giving everything, and still not being chosen. He had felt it many times in his own quiet life. A bell rang in the hall. The trial was over. The judges stood and spoke. "The Blade Kael'shar has chosen no one this year. The platform will be sealed until the next cycle." The crowd began to leave. Some people argued, some laughed, some simply looked tired. The guards prepared to close the hall. Lights dimmed, the music faded, but then a soft voice spoke. "I would like to try." It was not loud, but clear. Everyone turned. Taran stepped forward, walking slowly toward the platform. His face showed no fear. The guards moved to stop him, but one of the judges raised a hand. "Let him pass." Whispers filled the hall. "He's just a human. He didn't even sign up." "Who is?" Taran reached the steps. He paused, looked at the blade, then stepped onto the platform. The hall was silent again. He stood in front of the sword, took a deep breath, and placed one hand gently on the hilt. Nothing happened at first. Then, the blade began to glow. The light started small, a soft blue spark at the center. Then it grew brighter. The symbols on the platform lit up. A deep sound, like a slow bell, echoed through the hall. Gasps rose from the crowd. The blade lifted itself from the platform. It floated in the air for a moment, then gently fell into Taran's hand. His grip was not tight. His face was calm. The sword fit in his hand as if it had been waiting only for him. The guards stepped back. The judges stood in shock. Even Nara dropped her notebook. Corv stepped forward with disbelief. "This is not possible. He has no title, no war record, no legacy." Taran looked down at the sword, then back at the crowd. "I don't know why it chose me. I only know I didn't force it," the judges whispered among themselves. One finally spoke. "The blade has made its choice. The trial is over. This year, the Kael'shar has awakened." The crowd remained silent, unsure of what they had just seen. Taran looked around, then carefully placed the blade across his back and stepped down from the platform. He did not smile. He did not raise his hand. He simply walked out of the hall as the crowd slowly parted to make way. A human had done what no champion ever could, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Taran walked through the quiet streets of Stonehall City. The blade Kael'shar was now tied to his back with a simple cloth strap. It no longer glowed, but its presence felt warm, like a quiet fire resting against him. People stared as he passed. Some moved aside without speaking. Others whispered in small groups. They had seen what happened in the Blade Hall. News had already spread across the city. The sword that rejected all warriors had chosen a human stranger with no title and no history. Taran did not walk with pride. He did not raise his head or show power. He looked at the ground and walked with the same calm steps as always. He found a quiet corner near the city gardens and sat under a wide tree. He closed his eyes and listened to the wind. Moments later, he heard light footsteps on the grass. He opened his eyes and saw Nara, the historian. She held a small notebook in one hand and a cup of warm tea in the other. "I thought you might need something," she said, handing him the cup. "Thank you," Taran said softly. Nara sat beside him. She looked at the blade on his back, then at his face. "You really don't know why it chose you?" Taran shook his head. "I don't. I didn't expect anything. I only felt like I should try." Nara looked up at the sky. Birds flew in slow circles overhead. The sunlight fell gently on the stone paths. "My family has studied the blade for 3 generations," she said. "I've read every scroll, Listen to every story. Most believe the blade waits for strength, but old records say it waits for something else, something harder to understand. Taryn looked at her curious. Long ago, she continued, before the Order of the Blade was formed, Kael'shar was part of a great defense system. The galaxy faced a dark enemy from outside known space, a force without shape or voice. The blade was created by the first makers, not as a weapon for war, but as a light in the darkness. It chooses those who carry not just skill, but balance, a heart that seeks peace even when surrounded by fire. Taryn listened closely. Her words felt like they carried weight. "I've never been a fighter," he said. "I've worked on broken stations, helped with food drops. I've seen fear, but I never stood in battle." "That might be exactly why it chose you," Nara said. "You didn't come to take. You didn't come to prove. You came with stillness." Taryn placed the teacup on the grass. "When I touched it," he said, "I didn't feel power. I felt memory, like it was remembering someone else." Nara opened her notebook and flipped through the pages. She showed him a drawing of an old temple wall. A figure stood in front of the blade, arms open, no armor, no weapon, only light around them. "This was drawn almost 2,000 years ago," she said. "The blade chose someone like that before. It remembers people like you." Taryn didn't know what to say. He looked at the drawing, then closed his eyes again. Later that day, he returned to his room. It was small, with just a bed, a wooden chair, and a window that showed the city walls. He placed the blade carefully against the wall and sat on the bed. Suddenly, the blade began to glow faintly. A soft blue light filled the room. Taryn stood and reached out. The moment his hand touched the hilt, his vision changed. He saw flashes. A world burning, ships falling from the sky, shadows moving between stars. Then a bright figure, not human, standing with the blade raised high. The image faded. Taryn stepped back, breathing slowly. "What was that?" he whispered. The blade no longer glowed. It rested again. Silent. The next morning, a message arrived from the Order of the Blade. Taryn was invited to the Inner Circle Hall. It was the place where leaders and judges met. Nara walked with him. "Be careful," she said. "Some of them don't accept what happened. They will question you." "I understand," Taryn replied. The hall was large and cold. Tall windows showed the mountains of Durnos in the distance. The judges sat at a long table made of black stone. One of them, a thin man with white markings on his face, spoke first. "Taryn of Earth, the blade has chosen you, but we must understand why. You are not a warrior. You have no past in battle." Taryn stood straight. "I don't know why it chose me. I didn't come here to take anything. I only stepped forward because I felt it was right." Another judge, a tall woman in gold armor, leaned forward. "The blade has always chosen in silence, but this time, it showed signs, light, sound, energy. That has never happened before. We believe something else is waking." Taryn listened carefully. "You mean the visions?" he asked. The room grew quiet. "You saw something?" the woman asked. "Yes," Taryn said. "Fire, falling ships, a shadow, and a figure holding the blade." The judges looked at each other. The oldest among them stood slowly. "Then the stories are true. The blade does not just choose a bearer. It also warns." Taryn stepped forward. "Warns about what?" "We don't know," the elder judge said. "But when the blade glows on its own and shows visions, it means the stars will change soon. Darkness may return." Taryn nodded. His heart felt heavy but steady. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "We want you to stay," the judge said. "Learn the ways of the Order. Listen to the blade. Help us understand what is coming." Taryn agreed. He did not feel ready, but he also knew this path had begun the moment he touched the blade. As he left the hall, Nara waited outside. She looked at him with calm eyes. "You're part of something now," she said. "Not because of strength, but because the blade remembers the light." Taran looked up at the sky. The clouds moved slowly like thoughts in a quiet mind. He did not come here to become a legend, but now the legend had begun to walk with him. The city of Stonehall had changed. Every street, every corner, every whisper now carried one name, Taran. Not as a traveler, not as a visitor, but as the one who held the Kale Shar, the blade that had waited for centuries. People came from nearby villages and far-off systems just to see him from a distance. Children asked about him. Elders spoke of signs and fate. But Taran stayed quiet. He now lived in the inner quarters of the Order of the Blade, a place built from smooth black, stone and silver lines that glowed faintly at night. The rooms were large but plain. The silence there felt deep, as if even the walls remembered things no one else did. Taran spent his days in study. He trained not in sword fighting, but in balance and thought. He read old records with Nara, walked the outer gardens in the morning, and sat with the blade beside him as the stars rose at night. The blade had not glowed again since the vision, but he could still feel something within it, like a quiet voice that was not ready to speak yet. One day, as he read near the Hall of Memories, Nara placed a book beside him. It was old, with thick pages and symbols from a language long forgotten. "This is one of the last books written before the first makers disappeared," she said. "It tells of the first time the blade moved on its own." Taran opened the book slowly. The pages showed drawings of fire falling from the sky, cities in ruin, and a light rising from the ground. At the center of it all was the blade, glowing in the hands of someone simple. No armor, no army, only stillness. He looked at Nara. "They always look like me," he said. Nara nodded. Maybe the blade does not trust power. Maybe it trusts something else. That evening, Taran was called to the training circle, a wide platform under the open sky, where warriors of the Order practiced. He stood alone in the center. Around him stood judges, students, and even Corv, the champion from the trials. Corv's eyes were sharp. His arms were crossed. He had not spoken to Taran since the trial, but his look said enough. He still did not accept the result. One of the judges stepped forward. "Taran, today we observe your connection with the blade. This is not a test of strength. It is a test of balance." Taran nodded. He untied the blade from his back and held it with both hands. The blade remained silent, but he felt a small warmth in his grip. "Begin," the judge said. 3 warriors entered the circle. They carried training staffs, not real weapons. Their goal was not to harm, only to test his movement and awareness. The first one moved fast, swinging from the side. Taran stepped back, calm. The second one struck from behind. He turned and blocked without force. The third came forward. Taran ducked, stepped to the side, and tapped gently with the blade's flat edge. The crowd watched quietly. There was no anger in his movements, no fire, no speed, only calm and timing. Each step was simple. Each turn was smooth. The blade glowed, faintly. The judges stood. Even Corv looked surprised. "He moves without pushing," one of them whispered. "Like the blade is guiding him." The 3 warriors stepped back and bowed. Taran lowered the blade. His breath was steady. The judge stepped forward again. "You understand the flow. You do not fight the blade. You walk with it. That is rare." Corv stepped into the circle. "Then let him face someone who does not dance." The crowd grew quiet. The judge raised a hand. "This is not the time for challenge." "I don't seek a fight," Corv said. "Only truth." He looked at Taran. "You carry something greater than all of us, but we know nothing about you. Who are you truly?" Taran looked into his eyes. I'm not a hero. I worked on small rescue ships, repaired broken systems. I never wanted a title. Then why did the blade choose you? I didn't ask it to. I only stepped forward when others gave up. The wind moved between them. The sky turned orange as the sun began to set. Corv stepped back. Maybe you're not weak, he said. But I still don't understand the choice. Neither do I, Taryn said softly. But I'll honor it. That night, Taryn sat near the quiet pond in the Order's inner garden. Nara joined him, holding a small star map. They say the blade glowed again today. Yes, Taryn replied, but only for a moment. Something is waking, Nara said. Old sensors near the galaxy's edge have picked up strange energy signals. The last time this happened was during the First War. The Order believes something is coming. Taryn looked at the stars. He remembered the vision. Falling ships, fire and shadow. Do they think I'm meant to stop it? They don't know yet, she said. But they believe you are part of what's to come. Taryn remained quiet for a while. I'm not ready, he said. No one ever is, Nara replied. But the blade thinks you are. He placed the blade beside him, its light now soft and steady. Maybe the journey was not about being ready. Maybe it was about being willing. For many days, the wind on Dornos carried only one sound: silence. But inside the walls of the Order of the Blade, thoughts moved like fast rivers. Old maps were unrolled, forgotten records were read, and quiet meetings happened in deep chambers. Taryn sat in the center of it all. Each morning, he trained not just his body, but his awareness. The blade, Kyle Shar, was more than a weapon. It felt like a listener, always watching, always waiting. Sometimes when Taryn held it, he saw small flashes again, broken pieces of a vision. Fire in the sky, shadow on a broken planet, a shape, dark and endless. The Order had begun to take those visions seriously. Sensors placed near the edge of known space had recorded strange movements. Signals came from the dark region, an unexplored part of the galaxy. That region had remained silent for centuries. Now, things were changing. The Grand Judge, a wise woman named Vera, spoke to the Circle of Masters. Taryn's visions matched the signals. Something is coming. We do not know what, but the blade is showing us early signs. Some of the older members nodded. Others looked unsure. One of them spoke. But he is not trained. He is not one of us. He is not like us, Vera replied. But the blade chose him. That alone means he is part of what's ahead. Taryn was not present in that room, but he already felt the weight of what was being decided. He had not asked for this path. Still, he walked it. One night, Nara brought him a device with ancient records. The screen showed a planet called Valkar, a world that had once burned during the First War. The blade had been used there, long. Ago, by a bearer lost in history. There are patterns, Nara said. Every time the blade awakens, it starts with signs. Energy changes, strange dreams, and then a darkness appears. Taryn watched the recording carefully. A figure stood with the blade raised, surrounded by shadow creatures. The blade glowed, so bright that even the screen struggled to show it. Then the image ended. Who was that? Taryn asked. No one knows their name, Nara said. The records call them the Lightkeeper. They disappeared after the final battle. Some say the blade remembers them. Taryn placed a hand on Kelshar. It felt steady, calm, but he could sense a quiet storm inside. The next day, while walking through the garden, Taryn was met by Corv. Corv no longer looked angry. He had a different expression now, one of caution. I want to talk, he said. Taryn nodded. They sat near a stone bench, far from the others. Corv spoke first. I trained my whole life. I crossed systems, won battles, followed every rule. When the blade chose you, I thought it was broken. I thought it had made a mistake. Taran listened but said nothing. But now I see, Corv continued, you don't carry the blade with pride. You carry it with care. That matters. Taran looked at him. I never wanted power. I only wanted to help where I could. Corv stood and reached into his pack. He handed Taran a small silver stone with a mark on it. This belonged to my teacher, he said. The one who holds the blade must never forget silence. I think you understand that. Taran took the stone and nodded. From that day on, something changed between them. Corv no longer challenged him. Instead, he began to watch and learn. Others followed his example. Taran became not a leader by force, but by presence. One morning, just before sunrise, the blade glowed brighter than ever before. Taran woke from a deep sleep and saw the entire room filled with soft blue light. The air felt heavy, like a storm about to break. He placed his hand on the blade. Another vision came. He saw a fleet of ships floating in darkness. Strange symbols marked their hulls. He saw planets with no light. He heard voices, low and distant, repeating the same word. Return. When the vision ended, he stood up quickly and went to the Order's command hall. The blade showed me something new, he told Vera. Ships, not ours. They're coming from the edge. The Order checked the sensors again. This time the readings were clear. Unidentified ships were moving through the dark region, silent, fast, and straight toward the border planets. The judges looked at each other with concern. We must prepare, Vera said. This is the beginning. Taran looked at the star map. The ships were still far, but their path was straight. No change, no signal, no warning. They don't want to talk, he said. They're already coming. Vera turned to him. Then the galaxy must decide. Fight alone or stand together. In the next few days, messages were sent to allied planets. The Order asked for a gathering, not for war, but for unity. They invited leaders, watchers, builders, and healers. Taran stood beside Vera as the messages were broadcast. We do not call for weapons, Vera said. We call for wisdom. Something is moving beyond the stars, and the blade has spoken. Taran added only one sentence at the end. I am not a champion, but I carry the blade, and I will walk toward the storm if I must. Across the stars, people listened. Some doubted, some prepared, some hoped, but the echo of power had already begun. The blade was no longer silent, and its chosen bearer stood ready. Clouds moved slowly above the mountains of Durnos. The sky was pale, and the wind carried the weight of coming events. Inside the stronghold of the Order of the Blade, Taran sat alone in the Hall of Balance. The sword Kael'shar rested across his knees. Its surface glowed faintly, a quiet reminder that something greater was approaching. Across the galaxy, planets had received the Order's call. Some answered with curiosity, some with silence, others with fear. The dark signals from the edge of space were increasing. No one knew who or what was coming, but everyone understood one truth. It would not be small. Taran had no titles, no medals, no past filled with battles, but he had the blade. And now the galaxy watched him with eyes full of questions. That morning, a message came from the Inner Council. The Order had decided to test Taran once more. Not with weapons, not with strength, but with choice. A ceremony would be held in the Chamber of Paths, an ancient room used to test the mind and heart of potential guardians. Taran accepted without hesitation. Before the test began, he met Nara near the gardens. She walked beside him in silence. They want to see if you truly understand the weight of the blade, she said. I don't blame them, Taran replied. They've followed the same way for centuries. Now everything is changing. Nara looked at him. Most people think trials are about proving something, but the blade's oldest teachings speak of trials that reveal, not prove. Taryn nodded. I'll walk through it as I am. The Chamber of Paths was deep below the main halls. It was quiet, cold, and filled with soft lights that changed color, slowly. The walls were covered with smooth crystal. In the center stood a round platform, surrounded by floating stones. Vera, the Grand Judge, stood beside Taryn. This is not a battle, she said. You will enter the path alone. What you face will not be real in body, but it will feel real to your heart. Let the blade guide you. Taryn stepped onto the platform. The blade in his hand glowed gently. A moment later, light surrounded him, and the chamber disappeared. He now stood inside a different space. The sky above him was dark, full of stars. He stood on a broken bridge in the middle of nowhere. In front of him were 3 doors made of light. A voice echoed around him, calm and deep. Choose the path that saves others. But know this, you cannot save everyone. Taryn looked at the first door. A scene appeared. A planet was burning. People screamed. Ships flew overhead. A small group of engineers sent out a signal for help. The second door showed another scene. A child stood alone on a frozen world. Wind howled. Her oxygen level dropped slowly. The third door showed a quiet colony station. Their shields were falling. A storm of energy approached from space. Taryn closed his eyes. He felt pain in all 3 choices. Each one called for help, but the voice had warned him, 1 door only. He stepped toward the second door, the one with the child. He touched the light. It opened. He now stood in the snow. The child sat beside, a broken pod. Her eyes were half closed. Taryn knelt and wrapped his arms around her. He gave her warmth and whispered calm words. Time passed. The storm faded. A rescue ship appeared in the distance. Then the scene vanished. He stood again on the bridge. The voice returned. You saved one, but the others fell. Is that your truth? Taryn did not look away. I did what I could. Not to be perfect, only to be present. The voice was silent. Another path opened. He walked forward. This time, he entered a ruined city. Shadows moved among the ruins. He heard cries for help and saw a weapon near his feet. He picked it up, but did not raise it. Instead, he followed the sound. He found a small group trapped under rubble. He put down the weapon and began lifting stones with his hands. His fingers bled. His arms shook, but he did not stop. Finally, the last person was free. Then the scene ended. Once more, the voice returned. You were given a weapon. You chose your hands. Why? Taryn looked up. Because saving is not always done by force. Sometimes it's done by care. The voice was quiet again. A final path opened. Taryn stepped through. He now stood in front of a mirror. Inside it, he saw himself. But something was different. In the reflection, he wore shining armor. His eyes burned with power. Around him stood soldiers waiting for his command. The voice asked one final question. Would you trade your life of silence for a crown of control? Would you lead the galaxy if the blade gave you power over all? Taryn looked into the mirror. I would walk with the galaxy, he said, not above it. With those words, the mirror faded. The chamber returned. Taryn stood on the platform again. The blade in his hand pulsed once. A soft blue ring of light spread across the room. The judges stood. Vera spoke first. You have passed the trial, not with force, but with clarity. Corv stepped forward from the side. You chose the hardest answers, not the loudest. That is, what the blade remembers. Taryn looked at the faces around him. Some were proud, some surprised, some thoughtful. He did not smile. But in his heart, he felt stillness. That night, the blade glowed again. Taryn saw another vision. This time, The dark fleet had moved closer. The stars behind them had begun to fade, and the time for waiting was ending. The stars were no longer peaceful. From the edge of known space, a fleet of dark ships moved forward. Silent, cold, without signal or warning. They did not answer calls. They did not send messages. They only advanced, one system at a time. Sensors on nearby planets showed strange readings. Energy that twisted light, machines that stopped working without damage. Small moons vanished from maps. It was clear now, this was no regular enemy. At the stronghold of the Order of the Blade, the I.O. leaders had gathered. Tyron stood in the middle of the round table. The blade Kael Shar rested at his back, glowing soft and steady. His face was calm, but his eyes held quiet strength. They will reach the border planet Del Nor in 5 days, Vera, the Grand Judge, said. If we do nothing, the people there will fall without knowing what happened. One of the old masters leaned forward. Our ships are fast, but not enough. Our weapons may not even work against that kind of force. We must still try, Terran said. This blade was not made only to fight. It was made to guide. Maybe it knows something we do not. Another judge looked at him. What do you suggest? Terran pointed to the old star map. His finger landed on Ilari's gate, a hidden route known only to a few travelers. We take this path. It brings us to Delnor 2 days earlier. We go not to fight, but to meet the enemy first. Maybe there is still a way to speak before it becomes war. Some shook their heads. Others nodded. Finally, Vera stood. Let the blade-bearer lead. We will follow his light. Terran prepared his ship the same day. He did not take a fleet, only one fast vessel and a small crew. Nara came with him, carrying her records and old star codes. Corv joined too, dressed in light armor, not for battle, but for protection. They entered Ilari's gate and disappeared into the silence of deep space. The journey was not easy. The path was full of drifting rocks and broken stations from old wars. The ship shook at times, but Terran remained focused. Each time he placed his hand on Kael Shar, the light inside it pulsed like a compass. After 2 days of travel, they reached Delnor. The planet below was green, peaceful, and quiet. Its people did not know what was coming. Terran sent a message to the council there. Prepare your shelters. Call your people home. A shadow is moving. From the window, they saw the sky shift. One by one, the dark ships appeared. No engines, no flame, just motion, like drifting stones with purpose. Terran stepped onto the surface of Delnor. The wind was gentle, the sun above was warm, but the ground felt heavy under his feet. The blade on his back began to glow again. He walked alone toward the open field beyond the city. Nara and Corv watched from a distance. A single dark ship lowered itself to the field. It did not open. It did not speak. Terran stopped 20 steps, away, and placed the blade in front of him. I do not come with weapons raised, he said into the open air, but I do not come empty. The ship opened. From within came a figure, tall, thin, made of shifting metal and shadow. Its face had no eyes. Its voice was soft, like wind in a cave. You carry the living blade, it said. Yes, Terran answered, and I ask why you come. The figure stepped closer. The light from the blade grew brighter. We are not new. We are what your oldest stars tried to forget. We do not bring war. We bring return. Return of what? Terran asked. Balance, the figure replied. This galaxy forgot the first promise. Growth without respect, power without peace. We come to remind, to remove, to restart. Terran stood silent for a moment. Then he spoke. Not all forgot. Some still remember. Some still try. Let us rebuild before we break again. The figure looked at the blade. That sword once stood against us. Its light closed the sky, and yet It chooses to speak now. Maybe. It knows there's still a chance, Taryn said. The blade pulsed. A wave of blue light moved across the field. The figure stepped back. For the first time, it paused. You are not like the others. You carry no anger. I carry hope, Taryn replied. The figure looked up at the sky, then back at him. We will wait. 3 cycles. Speak to your stars. If they still chase only power, we will continue. If they listen, we may step aside. The ship rose again and vanished without a sound. Taryn turned and walked back. The field behind him was still green. The blade returned to its quiet glow. On. The ship, Nara, and Corv waited. What happened? Corv asked. We have time, Taryn said. Not much, but enough. Back at Durnos, the Order received the message. A meeting was held across the systems. Some feared, some doubted, but many listened. Taryn's words spread, not as orders, but as reminders. Power is not always strength. Weapons are not always answers. Sometimes the galaxy needs someone to speak. Before it breaks, the blade had waited for that voice, and now it had found one. The storm had not ended, but light had entered it, and the legend had just begun.